Yes, welcome back. This is F a Rap Critic. I'm still your boy Malik 16. And no, you ain't got no work for us. And when I say us, it's because I'm still joined by my ace, the homie herself, Miss Indigo Nicole. And we're taking you on this ride through this category 2 where we go over the rap performance on the album. The album that we're talking about is Black Rain by Queen Latifah. And with no further ado, let's jump into it. But pause for station identification. If you have not already, take a moment to go like and subscribe to the channel. Go hop on over to the rapruler.com where you can cop lovely t-shirts like this. I used to love a t-shirt since it's still Women's History Month.
Dope.
Thank you. It's hard. I always show like the video of it because like when I stand up, it's like it looks crazy. But yeah, you see the whole.
Okay, I didn't even see the bottom too.
Now let's jump into it. The first dimension we talk about in category 2 is going to be dimension 1, personality and charisma.
Lots of it
From the queen herself, Queen Latifah. This is all about how she represents herself on this album and how she compels you, the listener, to keep listening. So if we can put our finger on it, what is it that Queen does on the album that makes us want to listen to her for a whole 15 tracks?
It is confidence. It's like, I don't want to sound generic, but she has an assuredness, like she knows herself, and it just comes off like supernaturally. Like, yeah, she knows who she is. Like she's talking to us. She knows that she's talking to us. She knows that she's conveying her emotions. She's conveying, even the intro, right? Black Hand Side. Like she's talking first. We hear her going back and forth. I think it's Sid or somebody, and it's like, oh, okay, there's a little bit of conversation going there, and it's relaxed, right? She's talking she's relaxed. She is so herself throughout the album. She's herself when she's singing jazz explicitly. You can hear the joy. It's sad, but you can hear her joy. Like, oh, okay.
There's a comfort. There's a comfort that she approaches with. But I think something it's harder for me to put my finger on this. Her style of braggadocio, I think in 93, it wasn't popular for a lot of rappers to approach second person verses, rapping to you. Usually we were still in the era of I'm so and so, I'm this, I'm that, right? And then you might mention who you're talking about by name, like, oh, by sucker, but Queen is every verse she's talking to you. Whoever that person is, she's saying, you ain't got this, and you ain't doing this, and you making this mistake. And so her braggadocio takes a different direction than a lot of the braggadocio at the time. And I think what it helps not make her sound as egotistical as any other rapper that probably would have came out calling themselves Queen. I think about what Nicki Minaj does, and Nicki Minaj's braggadocio is kind of off-putting to some people. It's polarizing because it's, well, I'm the dance and I'm me. It's me rap. Queen Latifah is not doing me rap. Even though she's talking about herself, she's talking about herself through the lens of the mistakes you're making.
Right.
Whether it's a teachable moment, and that's the other thing. Her braggadocio comes in the form of teachable moment. It was just, it's not an easy path to take. Her things, I'm gonna watch you fall flat on your face, are kind of like what her lines are filled with. It's not like, I'm the baddest when I walk off in a room, It's
a comfort, and just to kind of accentuate what you're saying, I think it's also like I lost the word I was going to use. It's a wisdom to it, like a wisdom to her. And I think what you're speaking to, like you have to have some type of wisdom and awareness to even do that, right? To not talk in the first person. Because that means you're seeing people, you're seeing their actions, you're hearing them. And thus you're able to take your words from, me to like, it becomes a we instead.
She uses the language of what she doesn't need to be. So while affirming everything that she knows she is, she if I think to a lot of the lines on this album, it's a lot of, nah, I don't even need to do this, and I can do this without trying, or or I don't have to be this to be that. And she always acknowledges the lane of others. She's like, you can do that if you want. This is not for me. This is what I do. It reminds me of Erykah Badu's song Booty, which was one of the most clever ways of bragging. It's humble bragging, basically.
Right.
It's saying, look, this is a song about sisterhood. I'm approaching it from a backwards manner, but at the end of the day, this song is about, yo, I think we could do better than this guy.
Right.
Genius.
Right.
That's how she approaches it. She's like, I'm gonna wait for you to make this mistake. I'm gonna give you the opportunity, and then I'll show you what you need me to be in that moment. And we touched on this in category 1 where we were talking about the angles. And so because she gives you angles, there's texture to the personality here. I think about Listen to Me, and she calls herself lover of the people. They love of the people. But then you get rough. I can turn into that. That's not my default, but I can be that if that's what you really wanted from me.
Right. And it's something that I can embody. And I think and that's still connected to the bigger theme of like her seeing herself as not separate from we. Like, there's complexities to my personality. That's why I want to express it throughout this whole album. I'm gonna tell you in each track in a different way, and each verse in a different way. But that's no different from what you might be experiencing.
Yeah, she doesn't bullhorn away. There's no crazy declarations here. There's affirmations and assertiveness. So like a song like Coochie Bang.
Perfect word.
A song like Coochie Bang, it's not a no anthem. It's not a finger wagging. You ain't getting none. It's like, you gotta have a condom. And even in the verses, the playfulness that she's approaching it with. She's like, to put it close, you need a rubber for your lover. Like, then you got it, and even
Treach leading the hook, right?
Right.
And then he's like, the fellas, and then ladies, and then the lady says what to do.
Right.
Like, even that's clever. Like,
there's something to what you were saying. There's this, I'm connected to the people. She doesn't separate herself from the people. But she is telling you she's a queen, even if she's just a queen of herself. That's one thing about Queen Latifah. She never, all the king rappers that had come, they would talk about being a ruler of their subjects. I don't remember her. She might have played with that on the first album a little bit, but for the most part, she was always just about a queen individually. Not. I'm
just like a native tongue ethos. Like she's that woman in the native tongue, like that energy that's there.
Right. But never like you peons bow kiss the ring. So she's connected to the people. We talked about that whole, these men are my equals. Like, you're gonna listen to this KRS-One verse the same way you listen to my verse, kind of feeling. And then there's this overall classiness that she brings. Even when she's ripping you to shreds, she's not getting super vulgar with it. I think the most vulgar thing she says on air is that even when I don't try, niggas hang from my two tits or something like that. And it doesn't sound like something that she would normally say, which is why she only says something like that once on that album. And even that is within the context of, I'm not even trying to do this and I get this. I don't need to do this to get that. So these are all things to consider when you're thinking about the personality and the charismatic aspects of Queen Latifah and what she's getting across here on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Okay, so for personality and charisma, what we giving is Indigo?
Oh, she got a solid 5.
All right, so on the scale from 1 to 5.
Queen is hyped up. I know that was right.
Takes us to dimension 2, the believability or the suspension of disbelief. So first, we have to use process of elimination. Is this an album where you're being asked to suspend your disbelief?
No.
Yeah, I don't
And
think
I'm trying not to make sure I go into any other zones. I'm trying to make sure we stay on course, that I'm not jumping ahead.
This is not a character or persona type album. The only persona is this Queen Latifah identity, but there's never been a separation of that from who she is, right? And so on this album, I think you're being asked to believe what's being said. And this is, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is one of the first projects of hers where she's referring to herself by her name. There's 2 songs where she calls herself Dana. She says Dana Elaine.
Elaine, yep. Yeah, she says her middle name.
So she's really trying to establish this new direction for Queen Latifah. And you get to know that vulnerability. So there's moments of vulnerability, obviously, on the songs where she's talking about her brother. But if we talk about the last song, she decidedly makes the rap verses about herself. She's like, sometimes I'm this, sometimes I'm that. Here's what I'm not. And she talked about insecurities within that verse. But then there's less obvious ones, less direct ones, like Just Another Day, which that song is a mashup of 2 elements. This is her trying to be normal and enjoy a normal day and showing you, hey, I'm still this girl from Halstead that just wants to relax around things that are familiar to me, whether it's in Jersey or I'm going uptown in Harlem. I just want, Latifah's on vacation. It's just plain old Dana today, But it's her observational trip through the ills of the ghetto at the same time. I thought that was a brilliant move too. It's like, oh, this song is just not yesterday somebody got shot and it's all bad. She's like, I'm on my way cruising in my Jeep. I need a bean pie. But damn, I see your brother get handcuffed. On to the next thing. I'm still moving on with my day.
It's interesting because some of the songs, after kind of hearing that, feeling like I'm hearing the album for the first time in a long time, like with new ears, right? Some of the songs sound like someone rapping about her who knows her, but they wrote it.
Yeah. You feel that way?
I do. And that was the first time recently that I felt that way.
Wow.
Right? And I was like, I guess, and I'm trying to remember what songs. I think it was Just Another Day. Because Just Another Day for me is also very similar to like, Ice Cube, Today Was a Good Day. It's like the kind of cultural equivalent, right?
Kind of
mood-wise.
She's just one step away from everything, where Ice Cube was in every episode that was happening.
Right.
With her, she's like, I'm in my car seeing these things, but I'm still moving on to my destination.
Right. Because some stuff she wasn't touching. She was like, damn, they about to arrest him.
She's like, the 7-year-old girl got shot. I hope there's a hood in heaven.
Right. And I think, and again, and that was me also identifying whether I was making assumptions all these years of like, oh, these are scenarios that she would go through. Obviously, we know hyperbole. We know like we were right about stuff that you may not be experiencing. But there was, and I'm trying to remember, there was like some other words around, that were used, or just descriptions that I was like, is this a man talking? Like certain perspectives, and I was like, okay, I don't know how many women, and I know it was a term of the time in other decades and other eras, like how many say Jimmy hats. I think that's what kind of got me like.
I think for the female rappers at the time, you're gonna hear all of them say that word, that term.
And that's and
Nikki
that's
D,
like,
MC Light, you're gonna hear Jimmy hats.
Okay, Jimmy hats in case I need protection.
This might have been the last word, the last year for that terminology too. Before it turned to like raincoat and all these other things, right? I feel like those moments do create a vulnerability. It's like, this is for my protection. Safe sex, this is for my protection. Then you get romantic vulnerability. So Mood Is Right is all about, I want to do this with you, but these are the steps that need to be taken. This is pretty much the the popular theme for female rap at the time. Like, we can do this, but you gotta wait, boy, right? You gotta pass my test. That was, you know, kind of like requisite rap song theme for the female rappers of the day. Then Superstar.
I was about to say similar in a similar vein. Like, you don't have to be Superman or a superstar.
Yeah.
You know, date me.
Now that's the song that I thought might have felt like this is through the gaze of someone who knows her well. Like, what would, now that you're a bigger star that you've ever been, what does dating look like for you? And here's, so, but still, it was a unique song, because how many female rappers at the time could say that they would, I mean, I'm sure they could probably project, right? I'm sure Antoinette could have tried to make that song and it wouldn't have felt as believable. With Queen Latifah, it's like, oh yes, you are a star. This might be hard dating for you.
Right. You know, and honestly, and I'm gonna interject a little bit, like a topic that's related to today, because, like, you know, even with her queerness, everything about Queen was always like, this is just who I am, and who, if I'm talking about anything even more intimately, is from my inside crew. But I'm showing y'all who I am. I'm not being extra explicit. Like,
yeah,
that's what I've always loved about her. She's just like,
Queen Latifah set so many precedents for what was normalized for perceptions of women in that era, effortlessly too. Like, as much as people credit her for being this like super feminist, her albums never felt like an agenda. You know, even as we think about this album, there's not a bunch of songs all speaking that I am woman, like none of that.
I think the first two albums were more so, but I still think they were genuinely her. Like, I don't think she wasn't putting on airs, and I don't think it was as it was deliberate, but not like, it didn't feel cumbersome. Like, okay, I'm gonna do this. Like how you make a list of like, oh, my party song, like I'm gonna make sure I talk about this as a woman.
Right.
Her deliberateness in that just felt, like you said, effortless. It was like, this is who the fuck I am. So hell yeah, talk about them for real. I'm gonna speak to that. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that in revisiting the album, you know, prior to this discussion, was like, for me, the thing that always stood out about Queen herself in this album is how totally she was herself, and there was no pretense, and it was like, oh, that's the way, as a kid, I was like, that's the way I want to be. That's the way I feel, right? And so she has these anthems, you know, that we would introduce ladies first. I mean, UNITY was like, oh, that's how you do it? Oh, that's all you got to say? Oh, okay. Who you calling a bitch? Like, it was like, I'm not saying this is not a snipe to the movement at all. But it's like, oh, this is not the Me Too movement that white women overtook. This is like, no, I'm just telling you what it is. It's her delivery. It's the delivery on each of these songs too that we're talking about, right?
Yeah. Which takes us to the next dimension. So these are all things to consider on the believability and suspension of disbelief scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. For believability versus suspension of disbelief, what are we giving this?
I'm gonna give her a 5.
Okay, that's how much we believe Queen on this album.
Heck yeah.
Okay.
That assuredness, that goes a long way.
Ooh, we're gonna jump right into dimension 3, delivery. Can we get a slow clap? Queen Latifah's delivery is legendary. This is
whole album.
This is
the we hear her talking to Hey, like that Hey, like I'm like, yo, she black. She at the cookout, like
yes. Come on and set it off.
And maybe that is part of her embodiment and her acting, like her skills to conjure. Because acting is you conjuring. You're conjuring people, you're conjuring energies, you're conjuring stuff. She is able to, as an artist, as a rapper, as a musician, to conjure. And she conjured all types of energy for every single song and every single verse. And
here is where we can break the release on the valve and clip the lock and finally have the discussion. what we've been waiting to talk about is the ghostwriting discussion, right? Because your delivery is the art when you may or may not be the person behind the pen, right? And so she breathes and lives every word that's being said and injects so much life into what's being said. And these are not easy verses. And we'll talk more about it in the next dimension, but to be able to remember to say a word a certain way in the midst of a complex rhyme structure, that's work. And so there should probably be a separate class for rappers who may or may not have written their own stuff, who are able to deliver it in a way that maybe even the person who wrote it couldn't do. You know, whenever I've ever heard Gilly, you know, I'm glad he's found success in the podcast world, but for those years that he was going on his tirade about Lil Wayne, I was like, all due respect, Gilly, you can't even deliver your raps with the same oomph.
When it came off the same way, we would not have had the same reaction to him as Wayne. Real talk.
Right. And so Queen, it's been long rumored that, you know, we know Apache. I think Queen has actually verbalized and said outright that Apache has helped with the writing. For those of you not familiar, Apache is another Jersey artist, man behind the song Gangsta B, and part of the Flavor Unit, but long time rider, homie of Queen Latifah, a rapper in his own right, respected, but whose career was kind of cut short and did mostly ghostwriting. But I don't hear Apache's voice on this album. What I hear is the influence of another pen, Treach. And
interesting.
And we'll talk more about why in the next dimension, but I would go as far as to say that I was listening to Treach's verse on Rough, and maybe Treach is brilliant enough to do, because, you know, when writers write for other rappers, they may dumb it down a little bit more, make it more digestible than they would for themselves. But in either case, it sounds like Queen Latifah did better with that delivery than Treach has on some of his own stuff, right? So let's take a song like Black Hand Side, right? The second verse. There's a part where she's like, you can't come out to play right now, you got too much to do. And that's just a little piece, that's a deviation piece of the pattern she was using before, but if she matches, she creates different inflection for every part that needs it. If it needs to be a cool part, she's gonna say it with a casualness and effortlessness, right? And to the point where I feel like she might have written the first verse and Treach wrote the second verse.
In Black Hand Side
in Black Hand Side. Because I think the Who Got My Back is more Queen Latifah's wrote. Because if we listen to Living Singles theme, I think she wrote that entire theme.
Yep.
You know? My own girl, it's more of a boisterous chanty style. What happens with what I believe to be Treach's pen here is you're getting these complex, wordy.
I call it the roller coaster. He's more the roller coaster.
Yes.
That she is in gear. She's the first rider in the front. She's like, all right, I'm going.
Right.
She's the one that's screaming. She's like, oh, I'm gonna ride this sucker. My hands is up, we out.
But what she brings with her delivery is a clarity. I think a lot of times with Treach on his own work, he runs his words together. So you little lot of wait a make of it, because he's, you know, doing a lot of stuff all in one long breath. And Queen Latifah's not doing that breathy flow. So you want of it, she's enunciating each thing. She's cutting through it. That same, you know, set, but there's a clarity. So yeah, that's what I mean. I feel like if Treach would have said that line, he'd be like, you can't come out to play right now, you got too much shit to do. Yeah, like, she's like, you can't come out to play right now, you got too much shit to do. And then after that, it's something more stretched out. So she, the one on set, so why get neck? Because it's about to get set. You know, like there's a, with each thing. So, and then when she needs to be lighter, even when she's being playful, let's talk about like the kind of slick Rick influence style I can't understand, right? The second verse, even though I'm black and then he was a Puerto Rican. Like,
oh yeah, she goes totally different. Like that sounds totally different. Like everything on the album.
And so being able to show those dimensions is what you want. It's equivalent to what you want in an actor. An actor's catalog, you want to know that they were able to do drama, comedy, show vulnerability, show strength. To be able to have different tones, because there's some rappers that can't do that.
Right.
You know, have a playful tone, have a I'm serious tone, have a, as you mentioned, the bark. When I think about what you were saying about she's barking on the song, you really made me think for a second. I'm like, she is barking.
Yes.
She's using an approach that we hadn't heard her really use on previous albums. On the songs leading up to it, like I think about the Roll with the Flavor. Actually, maybe on like Latifah's Had It Up to Here, she had just started playing with that tone. Because I think her first album with all the grab the mic in a lyrical freestyle, she would keep that range, right? So she just started playing with this barking tone. And this is the tone she wants to use on this song. So she's got different intonations all throughout this album, and she uses them, let alone what she does with melody and singing.
But you see the variety in that too.
Yes.
Really dexterity. She has vocal and verbal dexterity.
Yes. Wow. What a perfect drop the mic bar.
That's dexterity, yeah.
And there's modalities with that. Listen to Me and Just Another Day are examples of her being soft without going as soft as she goes on her romance soft songs. Or even the playful soft songs. So, you know, the lightness and playfulness of Can't Understand and Coochie Bang are not the same lightness as Just Another Day. You know, Just Another Day is like that pull up a chair conversational lightness.
Right. She has, you know, a slightly more skewed to middle tone.
Yeah.
Type of voice.
There's a command to her inflection, right? The timing is always on. Queen is never gonna go off beat. That just
she's also like her time. Speaking of timing, her timing is like a good comedian too, like a good actor. Like when you see her perform live, like she is a consummate. Like she has dexterity there. She is a consummate like temperature taker and like I know what people need to hear, and I'm gonna take you through this roller coaster. Like she's got that timing.
You're right, because this decisions like how she said hard, right? I didn't know that's the word she said on UNITY, but she said, now you wanna be hard. She backed off on that word. And I think
you can feel it. The fact that you did all those movements let you know that she was effective in her delivery. Because if you don't do that, you're just gonna repeat it.
Yes.
But as an audience member, when you start to be animated, that's when you know the person.
You're right. Because she lightens up on even the way she says the line after that. You barely know your ABCs. Please. And then the young lady, like all those decisions. And I think on Black Hand Side is another line, a very Treach inspired line. She's like, get your narrow ass off the crack. You know, like, but it's the personality that she's injecting in each word, and that's something that I as a rapper has not even mastered, because it takes a certain amount of effort to make sure that in this take, especially if you're reading off paper. I don't know how people do their raps when they're reading off paper, and you're like saying, oh, I'm gonna say this word this way without ad-libbing. This is before you even ad-lib. This is as you're projecting it, you know. So it's something that a lot of monotone rappers can't tap into. So all these things are something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats, delivery.
We just bigged her up so much. Like, she got a 5 on that too.
Yeah, 5 on that delivery. Yeah. All right. Takes us to dimension 4. Everybody's favorite, the flow. All right. So if we mention these invisible pins at work here, possibly, may or may not be, right? Because Queen's career has been swirled by speculation from the hip hop world. Nobody in the mainstream has ever said, "Oh, she didn't write her stuff." But within the hip hop world, especially behind closed industry doors, the talk has always been about Apache or Treach, and then later on, maybe even some other people. Most recently, Jada has talked about writing some of her stuff, but Treach, the reason why you're gonna hear us bring up Treach is because the flow is the dead giveaway here. Treach has such a distinct flow that I haven't heard any other rapper replicate it. It's not a part of the fast rap. It's not a part of the iggity. It's not a part of the wordy Pharaoh Monch. It's kind of all of those things at the same time with a very, very distinct delivery. And you know, we're gonna go, when I go over the Naughty by Nature album that also turns 30 this year, 1993, I'm actually going to use the Naughty by Nature inspired logo for this episode just because it's so evident that Treach's stamp is on this album. Dating back to the album before this, you know, you start seeing Naughty by Nature and Anthony Chris in the writing credits.
All three of them. Yeah, all three of them.
Yeah, from the Nature of a Sister album, including the other popular song in Latifah's catalog, as far as a raw rap song, Latifah's Had It Up to Here. And as it took me re-listening to realize, oh, that's Treach's flow all over that. It's the fire. Latifah's Had It Up to Here, I'm telling. And so you're definitely going to hear that on all of the mid-tempo tracks that sound up-tempo and all of the pure up-tempo tracks on this album. Anytime you hear a track like Bring the Flavor, No Work, or anytime you hear those super intricacies. So the most obvious Treach song is Coochie Bang. He's on it. He's guiding that entire hook, and the verses are all in his cadence. And even some of the words that are being said, even Coochie Bang itself, I don't think that's a phrase that Latifah would go around saying.
Come up with, right. And I think it's interesting that, like, and I have the same assumption as well, that it's Treach's pen, but also like bringing Apache back into this conversation. It isn't explicitly evident or hearsay with this album. It definitely was with like the first two, but you know, some of the stuff I've come across is like Treach was like, and everybody's like, Apache was kind of like the architect of Flavor Unit, or foundational architect of Flavor Unit, and that Treach is like, that's my big brother. Like, he was the influence, because even if you listen to Gangsta Bitch, like, I was like, oh shit, that sounds like Treach. You know what I'm saying? So, and I had to kind of go back, and I was like, oh shoot, wait a minute. So where's the big influence? Who influenced who at different times and what levels? Because even, you know, I think Vinny did explicitly say that Apache, when he passed away in 2010, that he did write for Queen, but then also listening to what's his name? Was it Lakeem Shabazz from Flavor Unit from the early days? He also said that him and Apache used to write for Queen, but they also used to write for each other. Right? So thinking about his influence from the first two albums, which is super, you know, Afrocentric, you know, and that definitely was Shabazz's vibe. Like, you know, he had video in Egypt that was like, I am God, you know what I'm saying? Like, he was that dude. So I'm thinking, like, you know, how much of her being the boss, the queen that she is, it's like one of those things where, like, who's influencing who, what, during different times, because now we're talking about from, like, let's say 88, just to be on the safe side, right? We know her album came out 89. We know they were all working together collectively, you know, under Mark 45 King. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's that transition, the interconnectivity between all of them, right? It's like, what happens when you have a collective? Where's the influence, right? But then I do think, like, I agree with you that explicitly, I'm like, shit, that sounds exactly like Treach. And you know that they're together. You know that they're together. You know, frequently. So it's like, and where's the decisions? Because if you want an album like Black Rain, you have that much dexterity, you have that much variety, where are you going to get that variety from?
Right. It's kind of telling because if you listen to 1993, you don't have the same contextualized, you don't have the same wealth of content, you know? So it almost becomes this question of, well, Treach, if you're able to write these thought-provoking songs on everything from safe sex to the ills of the hood, then where is that on your own projects? Again, it's that Gilly the Kid, Lil Wayne thing. And I'm like, Treach is clever and smart enough of a writer to do this ghostwriting, to be the main writer of this whole album and it be believable. But at the same token, if you look at Naughty's body of work, it's like they've never embodied that. So is it the whole, I'll be a commercial successful artist for you, but I want to stay loyal to the rugged underground for myself? We know a lot of rappers have tried to stick to that ethos. I can see Treach doing that because Treach has always embodied this like intelligence and ignorance at the same time.
Well, to speak to kind of speak to what you're speaking to is exactly like the question that I have. It's like, how much of it is collaboration, right? How much of it may also be what I was talking about, last episode was like, can you write for somebody else that you know?
Yeah.
And in their perspectives, you know them, and they're close. So like, what Dana would say.
I'm of the mindset that any ghostwriting is a collaboration unless you are a manufactured artist or busy on an iconic level, right? So we know about Kanye because Kanye's like, I'm too busy being a mad genius.
Let me call Sci-Hi or somebody else. Yeah.
Right. And then we know about like Bow Wow or something like that, where it's like you're a commodity. You are the product, not your pen, right? So pour into this product. Those are two different things here. There is a setup here to believe that Queen might have been the former at this point because she was getting ready to do this show, but she wanted this album to come out. Maybe she was also contractually obligated because this is the first album. Maybe she got this deal before the TV show and she's like, well, I'm doing an album. Then she got busy with the TV show and was like, yo, Treach, I need some dope stuff that, the people are going to listen to. Write this for me while I go on the set.
Well, Latifah Had It Up to Here was great.
Right.
We need one or two on this album.
Right. So there's the stage is set to easily believe that. But then the stage is also set to be like, this is Queen freaking Latifah. This had to be a collaboration. This is a man writing completely for a woman and he's not dating her. Like, this is not a Herbie and Salt kind of situation, right? This is my homie. This is the big homie, actually. This is my boss at the time, right? This is the person that put me into the game. I know her well. Let's talk. What's some things that matter? Because I think about, when you said the thing about Just Another Day, she's saying stuff like, I got the fever for the flavor of a woo-woo. And I'm like, a man ain't drinking a woo-woo.
Oh.
If it's the drink. Now, if it's slang for woolies, I don't think Queen Latifah would be rapping about smoking woolies. But I think she means the drink, a woo-woo. Unless woo-woo is Jersey slang for something else.
And I don't know what that is. I don't know.
Right?
I still to this day don't know what the woo-woo is in that song. I didn't know what the reference was. So I was like, okay.
If anybody in the comment knows, please feel free.
And I'm from Jersey, so. Oh, and I think I'm going to put that disclaimer in there. Not disclaimer, but her influence for me, there was influence because I grew up in Jersey City. You know what I'm saying? So.
Oh, why didn't we say this in the intro?
I totally forgot about it. I totally forgot about it. But like, I didn't grow up in Newark. I live in Newark now, ironically, right? And so, my knowledge of firsthand every day being here versus just passing through or visiting is different. But like, Flavor Unit was started in Jersey City. Apache was in Jersey City. My best friend growing up, that was her big cousin. You know what I'm saying? Like, so she's like, oh yeah, Apache's my cousin. Never saw him, but I knew that was their family. You know what I'm saying? Like, just the way that everybody knew that, people used to pass through Jersey City. You know what I'm saying? Like Queen Latifah had a whole store in downtown Jersey City and lived in Jersey City. Always here because you could get to Staten Island mad quick, like 15 minutes if you're, in Bayonne. So just that, it was an energy that definitely was here. There's ways that I didn't experience it as directly. Like I knew it as a kid, but my parents are also New Yorkers living in Jersey City. So that grew up and moved there in adulthood. So their experience was different. So I didn't have that same firsthand. I had family later that lived up on the hill or lived in different areas, but it was just like, I did consume and absorb them, like the Flavor Unit and Queen Latifah, in a way by like atmospherically.
I'm trying to think of examples of flow besides those little kind of like moments, but Black Hand Side's second verse where she does the beat drop thing, whatever, and it's like, and again, and then goes back into the continuous flow right before she does that one thing that I said she does. So the Wave roller coasters, I think that's a brilliant way of putting it. I said the same thing about Black Thought, but Black Thought is like a safe roller coaster without drops. He might have some loops in there, but Treach is doing drops.
Yep.
Treach was using internal rhymes before this was a popular thing to do. So
and that's one reason why he was ahead.
And Treach likes to what's that? Pinball his internal rhymes. So not just like, Rakim might use internal rhymes, and a lot of people consider Rakim the father of internal rhymes, right? There's space. Treach wants to pinball off of each syllable sound on his way to the rhyme. It's like pat, 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 pat.
Right. He's closer to like a double helix. I think about things that exist in space. Like he's like that.
Yeah, so if he goes chain clang with the main thing, like he's gonna say bang bang clang clang and ring ring all the way till he rhymes with the other thing. Yep. And so when you hear Queen doing that, that's also what seems like a dead giveaway. It's like,
in his drops, he does have like even push and pulls too. Like there's a gravitational thing. Again, someone like an actress who can tap into that can enhance and underscore that in the way that she does, speaking to like what you were saying about like why he can't do the same thing that she does with his own writing. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I mean, and he does it. I just think she has just more.
They just have different styles and approaches to it.
Yeah, like we said, it's the slicing instead of running the words together. I think that's the defining feature. Because a song like Hip Hop Parade, you heard a lot about it, brought it in, low down, and hit the showdown for any.
And people like, and that's fun to sing. People like, that's why it was a hit. People like to say it the way that Treach says it.
Yeah. Oh, there's one track. She sings the way Treach sings right before she does the last verse. She said, and then she's like, and that used to be the way it used to be. And I was like, oh, that's Treach all the way. Because even your melodic chanting is in his style. So the songs where the verse structures are not as complex, again, it opens the question to be like, was it him? So can't understand. I'm not sure because I've never heard Treach take.
I don't think that doesn't sound distinctly like him.
Now structurally it does because it's the same amount of syllables, it's the same volume, but her delivery. If he did a reference track, right, the way Granddaddy IU said he did the reference track for Roxanne Shante, who is another god or goddess of delivery, because no matter how crazy it is that this man wrote this crazy diss track saying these wild disrespectful things about all the prominent female rappers in the game, the way Shante delivered it had that bite.
Oh, she bit. Frostbite.
I mean, when we talk about how Queen Latifah breathed life into every word, Roxanne breathed life into every word.
She got those asses. Like, yeah.
To the point my feelings were hurt to find out that she didn't write it because it seemed so passionate. And you know, when you hear the backstory, she even had questions about saying something else. She's like, "You sure about something else?"
Oh, she did. See, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Like, I just assumed that she was game.
Yeah, if you look up some Granddaddy IU interviews, he speaks on how even the idea for the song wasn't hers. It was, you know, so it's still the era of men manufacturing women's ideas, but
that's crazy because everything I've read up until read about it was her experience, you know, that led her to write it.
It might have been prompted by a conversation she had, but the idea to get the song was some guy named Fly Ty or something, and he approached Granddaddy IU, who another rapper who couldn't deliver it the way, you know, if we paid him, you know, it just didn't. Shantae, I mean that. Woo. Anyway, so yeah, Queen songs like I Can't Understand, Superstar. I'm not sure about that one.
Real talk, Apache might be in here, and you don't know, because her last rap album, he was on it. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, it is tricky. The only songs on here that I think Queen wrote herself are the freestyle one, that Just the Flow, and her verse on Wiki's theme, and those have the least complexity to them at all. And so I'm thinking, if I'm a rapper that hasn't written a lot of my own rhymes for the last 2 albums, my natural style is going to be a little stuck in whatever the mode it was the last time I used it, which is why I say on a living single, it's a chant. You keep your head up. What?
I mean, you hear that on Nature of a Sister. I could tell which songs are like definitely her, all her.
I'll do you one better. I can tell that she probably wrote all of her hooks except for Coochie Bang. Because
for sure. I'm with you.
The singing part sound, there's something about it I can't put my finger on, right? We're thinking like real people from the music world right now, because you just kind of know. It's like you can hear it. So when she's like, just another day living in the hood, just another, I don't think anybody wrote that for her. It just doesn't sound that way. Or the fact that the love of the people, it sounds like that came from her. Her decision to do the Listen to Me with the reggae tone, Weekend Love, those words sound like hers. All of that.
She's it's kind of like, not in the same vein, but I'm gonna use like Raphael Sadiq, who's a very simple writer, lyric writer.
Yes, too simple for me.
I mean, he's like, and he critiqued himself. He knows he's overly simple. He's it's not self-deprecating, but he recognizes.
He recognizes that. That's what I love about.
And he said it over the years, but where he's complex and beautiful, you can't touch him. Like, and there is beauty in simplicity. So, you know, when you hear her, whether it's the chorus or the raps that we can safely assume that she wrote safely by herself, like, it's still effective. And maybe that's the thing that, and again, I'm making wild assumptions on an album I didn't hear in a long time, which is the 98 album, which is like, you know,
Order in the Court.
Who wrote on that album and who didn't write on that album. Yeah. Right. And then again, like you said, match that with how much time has passed. So like, you know, how much work you guys, because even songs that I've heard of hers afterwards, like after that period of time, it doesn't sound like the Flavor Unit, Apache, Treach influence.
Right.
So, you know, and that could be for whatever reason, right? But you know, it is interesting that we both know when we think it's just her. Yeah. And it's still not bad. It's definitely distinguished. It's different for sure. Yeah.
It's whenever we have these ghostwriting conversations, unfortunately, so far they've been mostly when I covered the female rap albums that I've done so far. I don't think I've gotten into the territories where we start talking about even Ghostface, right? Iron Man. After reading Raekwon's book, I learned that on Cuban Links, Ghost wasn't using all of his rhymes, but Iron Man was where he was doing his stuff, but by Supreme Clientele, you start getting into these conversations about who else was at work. But
I heard Meth is in a lot of Meths, a lot of other people's lyrics are in there.
Right. And so, but not on Iron Man. I don't hear those stories about Iron Man. So I have yet to do any of the male albums where this gets touched on besides Diddy's album. Diddy.
I was gonna say he's probably the most blatant.
And Diddy is the case study, right?
It's like, I got money, write it.
But unfortunately, when we talked about Salt and Pepper's album, we talked about Foxy Brown's album. These conversations come up. So,
and that's why I said what I said earlier. I'm like, it's usually with women. It's whether you're monotone or somebody ghostwriting.
But when we find these things to be true, that doesn't help it. So it's like I can't wait till I get to like Radiga or Bahamadia album where I know, you know, yeah, that's flow. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. For the flow, Indigo, what we giving the queen here?
We're gonna switch gears on this one. For the actual flows. I gotta give a 5. 5 or 4?
Even though these flows may or may not be hers.
And that's what I'm thinking about. I was like, does that count though? The flow is a flow. That's what I'm saying. Flow and delivery.
You're right, because these flows, we already mentioned it. Treach was ahead of his time. These flows were intricate.
Right.
Hell, and they still are. That's the crazy part. Not just, they were intricate for 93. They still are intricate.
So, and I'm thinking about flow in terms of like her singing, like what she does on those hooks. Like,
yes,
you gotta give her 5.
Okay,
I gotta give her 5 then.
Fair enough. That takes us to dimension 5, the wordplay and the bar intent. So if we're surmising who may have written and who didn't, it's 1993. The wordplay is very clever for 1993. We're talking about there's some entendres in there. There's definitely punchlines of the day and things that maybe didn't matter to a lot of rappers in the era of trying to keep it real. There was some lines on there that had Chubb Rock and Heavy D levels of wit when we talk about playfulness. So you know, it's the
Chubb Rock is a great example.
It's more cutesy things that were done, like kind of how when we were talking about the way she says certain words and how she landed them. More than anything that's like, ooh, can't believe she said that.
Right. There's not a lot of that on that album.
Although I do think she may have used a fair share of alliteration on this album because, again, of Treach's presence. Alliteration lends itself to that style that Treach is doing. You're not going to hear it for a long sentence. You might get 3 words of the same consonant now, right? So,
and yeah, speaking of vocabulary, I think of vocabulary is straightforward.
Yeah.
Straightforward. Maybe that's what I'm thinking and thinking about.
Yeah. No big words. Not trying to perplex you. Not a lot of simile, you know? There's not a lot of, I do this like or that. Like, no.
Right. I do this or I do that. It's straightforward.
It is what it is. So yeah, not an album that's heavy on the wordplay, but something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. What are we giving this on a scale from 1 to 5, Indigo?
We're going to do a 3.
Okay.
We're going to do a 3.
Which takes us to dimension 6, which is the quotability, the overall quotability. And I usually bracket this 2 ways. Most of our rappers either give us one or the other, honestly. It's either quotability through punchlines or quotability through poetic wisdom.
So Queen sounds like she would fall in line with the Tupacs and the Scarface because I mean just UNITY alone.
Yes.
It is a quotable song because of that straightforwardness that is
absolutely
that is profound in its simplicity.
Yeah. There's an art to being profound and simplistic.
Very much so.
Part of that art is also being the first to say something. If you got to it before someone else, then that matters too, right? So Tupac was the first one to say, since a man can't make one, he has no right to tell a woman when to win. You know, so Latifah said, a man don't really love you if he hits you on wax. You said
that was before Eve, right?
Yeah, it is. I'm sure it's been said by some other rappers who tried to make a conscious song, but she said it on a widely popular single, and like you said, her timing that landed in that verse. That's a line that people remember from that song. Just like there's plenty of people out there with triggers ready to pull it. Why you trying to jump in front of the bullet, young lady?
Yes,
that's up there with Dead in the Middle of Little Italy.
Yes, it definitely is. R.I.P. Big Pun.
But those are all memorable, right? Now, don't get me wrong. When we playing, it's cool.
It's simply profound because you're like, don't be calling me out my name. The lines that we remember are the ones that are going to stand out. So within those songs where she is talking about something substantive is where you'll get poetic wisdom, and that's about all you're going to get, because the songs where she's being braggadocio, there's not punchlines. I think, as you said, she's saying what she's going to do. I lay that ass flat, right? Twice on this album, she says, if you diss me on wax, I take it to your face, or when I see you, we gonna fight. She's one of those rappers. She's from that school of thought. Like, I don't want to rap about it. I want to confront it, which I don't know what's worse. I don't know if I lean more towards let's rap this out. Well, we gotta fight. But hers stays on record on wax, so
she's never really that we know of, right? So yeah, you know, the quotables are gonna come from the singles. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody quoting lines from the deep cut.
The whole time you were talking, I was trying to remember some from the ones that weren't the singles, and I couldn't remember.
Even though No Work is ahead of its time, she killed every verse on there. Like, something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, punchlines, or poetic wisdom. What you feel like giving this, Indigo?
I'm straddling between 2 and 3. 3
sounds like a 2.5 to me.
Sounds like a 2.5.
Right. Takes us to dimension 7, concepts. Are there any concept songs on this album? I think the concepts we're going to see here or hear here are going to be loose concepts. There's no all-in concept where you're being challenged with your being challenged to think critically or abstract. Coochie Bang is conceptual in a way. Can't Understand is conceptual in a way.
I was gonna say Can't Understand, yeah. Like there's an overarching theme, and she kind of plays with it, and it tries to show up, or kind of shows up in the visuals for it too.
Right. Yeah, and you know, like you said, that touching on this overall sentiment of why are people as crazy as they are? Why do they try to play themselves in front of me? And why is the world gone mad? It's that whole thing. But beyond that, most of these things are just topical in nature, more so than conceptual. Superstar, Mood is Right, and we'll talk about all of these in the next dimension.
Maybe Winky's theme too.
Yeah, there you
song
go.
That is her singing on it fully, right? Like the different chapters of it, right? Like, you know, the way it moves and what the hook is versus what she raps versus the rest of the song and how she goes out. Like, there's an overarching, there is a bigger concept there, but like you said, it's about her, it's for her brother, about her brother, but it's really about herself and how she feels and what she's sorting through, right? And
then there's the spiritual part, because the hook is a piece of the Bible, right? But if you find this to be conceptual, rank it on a scale from 1 to 5, and if you feel like there's not enough, and that's a weakness. So what we giving this for concepts on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats?
Concepts, it's a little on the lower side. It's probably like 2.
Okay. Takes us to the content dimensions 8 and 9. So 8 is going to be the externalized content. How much outside of herself is Queen touching on? Is she talking about societal things, government, politics, the ills of the hood, any of that stuff outside of her immediate monologue? And in dimension 9, internalized content. How much expository stuff is she giving you from her own feelings and life? Just another day. I talked about how it's a little bit of both, right? This is how I want to get away song, but what she's getting away, what she's observing as she gets away, is commentary on hood life.
Right.
That's the most explicit, most clear example. Everything else is really nuanced. The relationship stuff it's interesting that her 2 relationship songs are like in the spirit of barriers. Like, these are the things that need to be worked on before we can get to this point. The mood has to be right, and your insecurity has to be addressed. Before we can get into stuff.
That's a good observation. I mean, that theme of protection, right? In its various forms. I mean, even what you just said is within that theme too. Like, like the Coogee song, like protecting yourself quite physically, right? Yeah. It's like, wait a minute, guys, ladies, here's what to do. If he ain't doing it, he can't come in. Like literally, she says, and then like, again, the Gap, the Glock, Jimmy hats. The type of protection that was talked about of the day, I'm saying? Right. It's still universal, right? But
wow. And then
that in there too.
And then on Winky's theme, she speaks of the protection of her brother being an angel watching over her. But again, with the biblical aspect, God's protection. Like, wow, what a crazy pickup there. Nice. So we get these content laden themes. And about maybe four direct songs that are about direct things. The rest are, like we said, they're slipped in there, they're spliced, they're interspersed verses that have some weight to them. But,
and you said something earlier that I think is connected to is vulnerability, right? Yeah. Like, one first song, she shows vulnerability, and then she talks about the vulnerability, like, what was it when she's talking about going out with the Spanish guy and what ends up happening with that dynamic? She's like, well, I need love too, that type of thing. Like, that is showing up where she's like, yeah, I'm going through these scenarios, and that can play into the overall theme of that song too, which is like, yeah, I can't explain why people are doing this dumb shit because it's affecting me. So going back to that wisdom, her being able to translate a me situation into a we situation, right? Because you got to be vulnerable to see somebody else's shit.
Yep.
And to express it.
Queen does that. She shows all of those angles there. Angles being the key word, but there is content. And there's specific content and less specific content, but they exist in both of those realms. More internal than external, but something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. For the content dimensions, both external and internal, 8 and 9, what are you giving these?
That's we straddling between 3 and 4.
So that's for both, or does one get more than the other? So does external get the 3 and internal gets the 4? Is that what it was?
See, we just talked about her. With her, it's kind of like interchangeable.
Well, we did also say she definitely speaks more about herself than outside stuff.
Let's do 3.
So 3 for external, and for internal, you giving 3 too?
I guess internal would give a 4.
Okay, so 3 and 4, your original numbers. Okay. All right, last but not least, takes us to the final dimension, storytelling. Your uncle, Mr. Kwame Veer, shout out to Unc, famously quoted, he's embedded in my mind from years of listening to him on underground radio. Shout out to WHCR, Equilibrium Radio. He used to say a good album has to have a story. It has to have a story included. You're not a well-rounded MC. That's the word that Kwame would use. Unless you're able to tell a memorable story on an album. So do we feel like this album has any memorable storytelling?
It's interesting because then I feel like that might be the concept.
I think this album is full of scenario rap. UNITY has scenarios, Just Another Day. There's a fair amount of songs right here that have anecdotal, like verses themselves are stories. And you can visualize these stories. Again, that second verse of UNITY, I see the woman packing her stuff and leaving. I see in the third verse the girl outside the window trying to jump some girl with her friends, trying to prove her value as a hoodster or something. And so and then the dating story that you were touching on with from the Can't Understand It song. She found the number in the pair of pants, and
so can scenarios add up to a story or stories?
That's a question I'll pose to all of y'all to rate on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats and determine, is that enough storytelling element for an album for you to get them in different places and spaces on different songs and accumulate.
Hers is like a compilation book.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a compilation. It definitely is stories. They're scenarios though. They're not, it's like a compilation of different writers or the same writer and they're different stories. They're short stories, right? So like that exists. So
on a scale from 1 to 5, what would you give it?
Damn.
Storytelling.
Based on what I just said, because I think that's what that's what this album is. It's a compilation that reads in small shorts. They're shorts. They're like,
they're shorts. There you go.
Right? Instead of saying scenarios, they're shorts, right? And her stories are vivid. I can, like you said, I can visualize them. I'm gonna give her a 4.
Okay, 4.
I can visualize. That's how I remember some of the songs.
Yeah.
Like I can see the scenario. I remember the picture of the woman or the man, whoever she was talking about, and I can still see them in my head.
And there again, scenarios that haven't been done in hip hop at that point, the way they were done, and then still to this day, I feel like some stuff that hasn't been touched on. So yeah, that concludes our category 2 review of the classic album Black Rain by the one and only Queen Latifah. From one Jersey girl to another Jersey girl, I had to bring the pro in, like I said. And to take it home, Indigo, it's been dope having you. We always go overboard, under and through when we go on topics, but damn if it don't be detailed and thorough. So we really are like Jamel Hill and whatever the dude's name was on ESPN. Mike something.
His name is Mike. Yeah, that part I remember.
Right. So one last time, can you let the people know where they can find you and what you got cooking?
So you can find me at 2 places. My Instagram page, my personal page, which, you know, I've met great people, great collaboration. So it's Indigo is Live, you know, on IG. I don't really do a whole lot of other ones. At Indigo is Live. And then you can find me at spelled out 3rd Star Connect. So again, I'm a brand strategist. So 3rd Star is my company. Indigo Live is my other page that you can contact me directly. I do brand, you know, like I said, brand management, brand identity, all of that stuff, messaging. So, you know, if you need some help, if you're a startup, if you've been around for a while, and you need to either refresh or revisit what your brand, what your company is about. There's always things that I always see, and I say, if you're a visionary, if you're an entrepreneur, you're a visionary, and you need to talk to other visionaries to help see your projects through. So branding is like sort of like entrepreneurship therapy in a sense, right? Visual therapy, and you basically have someone that can walk with you, to kind of see some of the stuff that you might not see, and bring some new ideas to the table. So that's a big part of what I do. And then filmmaking projects, so in the future, so tap in, connect with me, and you'll get a sneak peek into what that process is going to look like.
And Third Star website is still
Third Star. Yep. So website is Third Star Connect, which is the same thing as the IG, which is at thirdstarconnect.com.
Perfect. She made it easy for y'all. And again, it's been a pleasure having you. You made me think in some different ways and added some new perspective on it. And I hope I did the same.
Yep, you sure did.
And peep how she has the Sean P statue, which I also have deep in the back.
Word. There we go.
But she got hers out on display, and we got Mr. Meth here until we get him on the show. Y'all know what it is. F for Rat Critic.
Yep.
They talk about it while I live it. Word to Meth.
And to Sean P.
Thanks, sis.
Thank you. You're welcome.